Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us this morning. And this episode will be rerun again this evening, so good evening as well. With you is Meisun on TV Live. I'm in Montreal, joined by Mr. Patrick Brown, Mayor Brown, who's the mayor of Brampton, and one of the candidates running for leadership of the Conservative Party. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us this morning on Kennard TV Live.
It's great to be with you.
Thank you so much, and happy Mother's Day for everyone out there. Today is Mother's Day, so it's very exciting.
And I should say, I've got a very understanding wife. We had a bit of a Mother's Day celebration for breakfast, but she knows how busy this Conservative leadership campaign is, and I have her blessing to do a few interviews today on what is a day that should be dedicated to mothers.
That's fantastic, and we extend our best wishes to her as well for a happy Mother's Day. Mr. Brown, I'll get straight to the topics of discussion. I don't know if you'd like to begin to introduce yourself to the viewers and tell us a little bit about your key issues for campaigning.
Well, I've been elected for 22 years at all levels of government in Canada, municipally, provincially, and federally. I spent 3 terms in the House of Commons. I'm a former leader of the Ontario Conservative Party, and I am, of course, now the mayor of Brampton. You know, my goal in this campaign is to really change the Conservative Party to be one that fights for all Canadians, that is more inclusive, that really doubles down on the Canadian dream that anything is possible. With hard work, talent, there'll be no barriers in this country, whether it's foreign credential recognition barriers, whether it's religious discrimination like we see in Quebec with Bill 21. My goal is to remove all the barriers to that Canadian dream that anything is possible. And so I am excited to work on building this multicultural, multi-faith, big tent Conservative Party. And frankly, Canadian democracy needs it.
Inclusivity is a very important word you mentioned. Seeing that historically or recently, in the recent history at least, the Conservative Party has not been known to be particularly friendly to new Canadians or Canadians of certain minorities, and also is not always the party of choice. My curiosity is in asking this question is to find out as to what would be different in your type of Conservative Party, and can you really take, if you could take the person out of the party, can you take the party out of the person, in the sense that many people are thinking once a conservative, always a conservative. So my question is, Mr. Brown, how do you foresee this vision of changing a long-standing tradition of the Conservative Party to being one that is more inclusive?
Well, let me say, first of all, in terms of immigration, unless you're Indigenous, everyone's story in Canada is one of immigration. And so for those on the extremes of the political spectrum that push down immigration, they're actually pushing down our country, because our country is a story of immigration, and we should celebrate it, remove barriers, and continue to make that pathway of talent into Canada possible. In terms of being inclusive, it's everything I'm about. It's everything I stand for. I've at every occasion denounced hate. I always say it doesn't matter where you come from, the color of your skin, what God you worship. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly and equally in this country. And I understand there are elements in the Conservative Party who have let us down. And certainly I have been on the right side of history. You know, I know what you're probably referring to is the famous Islamophobia debate in Ottawa, when the Conservative Party voted against condemning hate against Muslim Canadians. At the time, I was at the time, I was the leader of the Ontario Conservative Party, and every MPP in Ontario voted with me to condemn Islamophobia. And people ask the question, why would the Ontario Conservative Party take a position completely different than the Federal Conservative Party? Well, the reason was leadership. I demanded our caucus to stand with me in condemning hate. For me, there is no shades of gray in this. We stand against hate, and I will leave no oxygen in any party that I lead for those who are going to attack fellow Canadians. And frankly, it's one of the reasons I've been very critical about Pierre Poilievre in this race. He presents a different version of conservatism that I disagree with. He was one of the people that got up in the House of Commons and voted against condemning hate against Muslim Canadians. For me, we need to be a party that celebrates every faith, every community. We need to be a party that fights tooth and nail to create equal opportunity in this country. And I look at his track record, and no wonder many Canadians are scared of his leadership. He was the one who did the niqab ban press conference in Ottawa, threatening to ban the niqab in the federal civil service. His campaign manager, Jenny Byrne, was the one who did the barbaric tip line press conference, which was attempting to have Canadians snitch on Canadians. I stand against those policies. They're too divisive, and we can't weaponize Canadians' fears against each other. Everything I've done in politics have been about bringing people together. And I'm proud to have stood with the Muslim community and, frankly, every community. I think Canada needs to be resolute in condemning hate, no matter where it comes from. We need to have the philosophy that if one group of Canadians is attacked, we're all attacked. And frankly, I was one of the few MPs that would go and speak 10 years ago at RIS. I've done work with Islamic Relief Canada. I went to Lebanon to volunteer at a Syrian refugee camp. I do work with the Muslim Welfare Center in the GTA, and I've learned the Muslim faith is about love, about helping one another. And when I hear examples of hate or those who contribute to Islamophobia, it makes me angry. Because here's the stark reality is, for politicians who pretend Islamophobia isn't real, or worse, play into the fears and flame Islamophobia, you get 1,000 people riled up. The consequences are real. They're vivid. They're scary. The consequences of Islamophobia is London. It's St. Foy in Quebec City. And Canadian politicians committed to the Canadian dream need to do everything we can to fight that hate, to extinguish it from the mainstream of a political party, not encourage it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. And to hear that from a conservative is quite interesting, actually. So thank you for that. Today, with the government of the Liberals, we still have not until this day, despite all the condemnation, despite all the heavy tone condemning Islamophobic acts and Islamophobia in general, we still have not seen Islamophobia become criminalized and recognized officially by instating an anti-Islamophobia type of bill. So if elected to leadership of the Conservative Party and eventually, hopefully making it into prime ministry, what would you do about that, Mr. Brown?
Well, I think we need to be consistent in our commitment to denouncing hate. And I believe that we should denounce Islamophobia with the same fervor that we do racism and anti-Semitism. I want to build a country where we have zero tolerance on hate. And those who commit hate crimes should certainly be culpable under our criminal code for the ugliness that they represent. We can't be on the periphery of this debate anymore. We've seen the consequences. I was in London last night speaking at a local masjid, and the horror that that the community has gone through with the killing of the Afzal family. I spoke to a family who told me in London they're scared to walk down the street, because of the way they dress. That can never happen in Canada, and this silence by some in the political spectrum to denounce hate, or at least pretend it doesn't exist, they're becoming party to the problem. And frankly, I go to what's happening in Quebec right now with Bill 21. We have legalized discrimination, and the government of Canada is sitting on the sidelines. The fact that Justin Trudeau and Pierre Poilievre say they're not going to get involved in Bill 21 because it's popular in Quebec, it doesn't matter if discrimination is popular, it's wrong. There are those of Muslim faith or Sikh faith who wear articles of their faith who are losing their jobs right now in Quebec. It's an attack on our religious freedom.
I couldn't agree with you more. Actually, pardon me, that was going to take me to my next question. Speaking about isolating a particular group of people just because of their differences, and I couldn't agree with you more that discrimination is being legislated. So, Mr. Brown, you're currently mayor of Brampton, and you've done some interesting actions toward fighting Bill 21 in Quebec. What led you to doing that when you're in an Ontario city, and this normally it has not been an issue that's been much concerned to the rest of Canada, unfortunately?
So, frankly, I came out when Bill 21 was introduced and opposed it vehemently. But then I waited a few years thinking that the government of Canada would step in with intervener status to challenge a bill that is clearly contrary to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And to my horror, the government of Canada hasn't. And the cowardly approach I've seen by the Conservative Party and the Liberal Party in Ottawa sitting on the sidelines is wrong. This is a moment in history. We could have a precedent in the Supreme Court that legalizes discrimination. And we need our leaders to stand up, not run away. We need our leaders to say, we don't permit second-class citizenship in this country. I will never accept treating those of Sikh faith or Muslim faith as second-class citizens in Quebec. It's not right, and it needs to be opposed. The government of Canada needs to immediately ask for intervener status and oppose this with the same resources that the government of Quebec is using to promote it.
How will you, if as Prime Minister on the federal level, be able to intervene to fight this bill and to hopefully bring it down, considering that there's a notwithstanding clause that's been protecting it so far?
Well, right now, there's not even a fight. You've got the government of Canada sitting on the sidelines, and it's charities. It's NCCM.
His hands are tied. Mr. Trudeau has said that his hands are tied.
Well, his arms aren't tied. His hands aren't tied. Literally, you have charities that are doing the legal fight, raising dollars off the backs of small donations of racialized minorities. It shouldn't be the NCCM, the WSO, and the Canada Civil Liberties Association fighting this. The government of Quebec has unlimited legal resources, and the government of Canada is hiding. It's not a level playing field. The government of Canada needs to stand up for our Canadian Charter, immediately insert itself into the court case, and put the resources behind it to make sure that every tool is used to make sure we're successful in defending this foundational value in our country. Religious freedom is a foundational value. And if I was Prime Minister, I would use every tool at our disposal to make sure this bill never survives scrutiny.
Again, that's really great to hear. I am just curious as to the reasons why the federal government hasn't stepped in against this bill in Quebec. I live in Montreal, so I know very well as to which kinds of groups are very encouraging of this bill and which groups are not, and the people's lives that have been severely affected by it and continue until this day to be affected by it. Aren't you worried about losing popularity in Quebec or potential seats that you're just now working really hard to gain?
So I think the worst moments in Canadian history have happened when our political leadership have decided to follow public opinion, put their finger up in the air and follow public opinion rather than doing what's right. I believe fighting Bill 21 and fighting for religious freedom means we're on the right side of history. And right now, the government of Canada is trading foundational principles for political convenience. And it's wrong. We need to stand up to discrimination. Right now, the bill is already losing support in Quebec. The more people who lose their job based on their faith, you're going to continue to see the bill lose support. But I'm going to give an example. You look at times in Canadian history when the government has embraced what is popular over core convictions, and they always go back to regret it. Look at the Komagata Maru incident. Look at the Chinese head tax. Look at the internment of Japanese Canadians. Look at the residential schools and the mistreatment of Indigenous Canadians. Those were popular at the time, but they were clearly wrong. And right now, I believe with the treating of communities of faith as second-class citizens in Quebec, one day we're going to have a prime minister stand up in the House of Commons and apologize for not standing up for the core principles of our country, which is religious freedom, which is equal opportunity.
Again, issues that historically the Conservative Party has always, as far as the foreign policy is concerned, stood for, had stands which were not necessarily those in favor of the Arab and Muslim community in Canada, such as supporting the moving of the Canadian embassy into Jerusalem. I would very much like us to hear your stand on this, Mr. Brown.
So I have said support moving the embassy. I think it would take us further away in the peace process and the two-state solution that Canada foreign policy aspires to promote. And so I will not support moving the embassy. I believe the U.S. government under Donald Trump did, but we don't need to be a replica of U.S. foreign policy. I think we can have thoughtful, considered Canadian foreign policy.
Will you be condemning states around the world who will be committing violations of human rights regardless of the stand of your party? specifically?
So I'm in that I will denounce violence anywhere. If there is violence in any corner of the world, I'll speak up against it. And a recent example was what happened in Al-Aqsa. There was too many Canadian politicians who disappeared, refused to condemn violence in a place of worship. No place of worship should ever feel intimidation. No place of worship should ever face violence. And I was one of the first Canadian politicians to speak up and condemn the violence at Al-Aqsa. I think there needs to be more clarity in Canadian foreign policy. Violence is wrong. Intimidation in places of worship is wrong. We would never permit it in Canada, and we shouldn't condone it abroad.
Mr. Brown, the community, as I've mentioned before, generally speaking, myself, when I speak to colleagues and friends and people I know in general, and talk to them about your policy, talk to them about your views and your opinions, and how moderate they are and how responsive they are to many of our issues in favor, I get the reaction continuously of a Conservative Party member is something that makes us very nervous to support. So what else can be said and what can be done, do you think, in your opinion, specifically in Quebec, to reassure us as members of the Arab and Muslim community not to have these kinds of fears? Do you think that it is possible to have a moderate conservative? How can you convey trust to these potential voters? And
we're at a crossroads in the Conservative Party right now, and there's two choices. There's someone like Pierre Poilievre, who has been on the wrong side of the community again and again and again, from the niqab ban to the barbaric tip line announcement to refusing to condemn Islamophobia. You've got a candidate like that who could potentially be prime minister if he wins this leadership. Or you have a candidate like myself, who has stood for human rights, who has stood for equality, who has stood against Islamophobia. And the only way to get an inclusive Conservative Party leader is to vote in this leadership. Don't give the Pierre Poilievres what they want. What he's counting on is the Muslim community not voting. I ask you to vote. I ask you to help me change the party from with inside the party to be a party that always fights for religious freedom, that stands against Islamophobia, and that stands for religious freedom. The only way we can do that is if you participate in this leadership election.
What can you promise a lot of the newcomers? I represent the Canadian Arab TV, and I'm a member of the Arab community, and I'm a Muslim. And I know that one of the problems that plagues a lot of the newcomers is trying to find jobs to be able to integrate into this the new Canadian society they find themselves part of. As far as educational requirements and fitting into the job market in Canada, what would your stand be into making this a more seamless process for especially the newcomers?
So we have real problems with foreign credential recognition in this country. 7 years ago, Justin Trudeau promised that he'd fix foreign credential recognition, and nothing's happened. We're in silos, and it's been never more apparent than during the pandemic. Right now, we have acute labor shortages in the construction sector, but we have engineers that can't get their degrees recognized. We had huge shortages
in the health sector, yes, with COVID.
We have huge shortages in the hospital sector, and you have nurses that can't get their degrees recognized, doctors that can't help out. And so I'd be fully committed to doing whatever I can to call a First Minister's Conference on foreign credential recognition to make sure the Immigration Department talks to the provincial professional accreditation bodies and to make sure that those who come to Canada have the ability to use their God-given talent. I think it's a travesty of opportunity. We need that talent. And if Canada truly is the country of opportunity and anything is possible, we need to tear down those barriers that exist with the red tape surrounding foreign credential recognition.
Thank you. Immigration is also another issue that concerns our community, generally speaking. Will you have any policies which will be friendlier as far as the immigration policies, making things easier for Canadians of certain backgrounds to make it?
So first of all, I want to say that I will expand our immigration system to help meet the labor market shortages that exist. We have acute shortages in the IT sector, the construction sector, transportation, logistics. And if you want to actually get projects off the ground, if you want to unlock the economic development potential of the country, we need immigration. We have acute labor shortages across the country. So yes, I'm going to expand the immigration system, tie it to the opportunities that exist in labor market shortages. But I'm also going to build an immigration system that has more compassion. I look at some of the horrors around the world. You look what's happened in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Rohingya, and too many innocent civilians have been abandoned. And I think a Canadian foreign policy that recognizes that we can help those who face adversity, who are fleeing religious persecution, have an ally in Canada is consistent with the finest moments in Canadian history. And we need to get back to that. We need to really highlight Canada as the land of safe harbor and freedom for those that are fleeing adversity. You look at those that fled the Tamil genocide, you look at the Vietnamese boat people. There are so many examples throughout history where we have stood strong. Right now, we're doing that with Ukraine, and I'm happy that we are. But I also believe, we can certainly do more in helping those in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Rohingya.
I certainly hope so. We've seen a lot of double standard lately with the Canadian government treatment of Ukrainian refugees in comparison to refugees seeking asylum in Canada from different backgrounds. This is something that is not acceptable as far as our Canadian values are concerned. So do you think that under your leadership this would be different? And how can we get a sense that we would be reassured basically that this would be the case, equal treatment to all people inflicted with conflict throughout the world?
So first of all, let me say that I think it's beautiful that Canada is helping in Ukraine, as we should. The invasion we've seen by Vladimir Putin is it shatters our sense of peace and security in Europe. But I would say this: it's also taught us what is possible when government's willing to work. And so when there are those who are abandoned in Syria or Afghanistan for 10 years, and we say that we can't process refugees, I think Ukraine shows what's possible. So not to criticize what's happening in Ukraine, I absolutely support it, but it shows where there is a will, how much more you can do. And I believe Canada can do a lot more in Yemen, in Afghanistan, in Syria, in Rohingya. And as Prime Minister, I'd stand up and protect those who are fleeing adversity, to create that beautiful pathway of the land of freedom, the land of safe harbor in Canada.
Hello?
Now I can hear you. Your audio is off.
Oh, my audio was off. Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I did not put it off. I went on and on. I'm terribly sorry. I was saying that because you don't have much time left. Thank you very much for being with us today. But I do have one last question.
Yes.
And that is concerning the economic policy. A lot of the other candidates who are running are talking about fighting this government-imposed or government-caused inflation, which is making it that much harder for Canadians right now with all the crazy, insane increases in pricing that we're seeing as far as housing pricing, fuel pricing, and so on. So I wanted a few words about your policy touching on economic issues and how you can be more reassuring of Canadians under your leadership. What would that vision of yours be like, and how can we go about in putting it in place?
Well, certainly I don't support the overly simplified solutions that Pierre Poilievre has presented. When he says you can solve inflation through cryptocurrency, I just don't think that is a credible statement. The reality is, obviously, there's a financial mess in Ottawa. We're $1.2 trillion in debt, and the government is printing money like there's no tomorrow, and they are contributing to the financial instability that we're seeing in our country. But there are international inflationary trends as well that contribute to this. And any politician who promises we can solve inflation overnight is not being honest. And I think we need to have honest conversations with the public. There are things we can do. We can clean up our financial house in Ottawa. We can stop printing money with no end in sight. And we can also create more competition. You know, one of the obvious areas where there is a lack of affordability is in the housing market. But part of the problem is we don't have the labor to build houses. Immigration can help with that. We have an approval process in Canada for building new product that is longer than it's ever been before. You know, 30 years ago, it might take 3 months to build a house, and now it can take 5 to 7 years. So we need to get more supply, create more competition, unlock the market forces. But I go further. You know, my goal for Canada is to create an economy that is the envy of the world. And the way to do that is you create a Canadian advantage. You want to be a job-creating engine. Make sure that the cost of production in Canada is slightly better than all our geographical competitors. Whether it's taxation, red tape, the ability to get product to marketplace, it is a global competition for jobs. It's a global competition for investment. And if it is cheaper to build a product in Michigan than it is in Ontario, then that investment is going to flow to Michigan. We need to make sure that we have the capacity to be competitive, that we can go and make a pitch to every industry and say it is easier to invest, to grow, to build a company, to hire in Canada than it is elsewhere. And I will be fully committed to doing everything I can to ensure the Canadian dream, the Canadian advantage is possible.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. I'm really impressed answer. Lastly, Mr. Brown, what would your last words, or what would you present our members of the Arab and Muslim community watching us today? What would your expectation be out of you're a politician running for office, and we're potential voters. But my question is to you: what would your expectation from these potential voters be?
So my expectation is clear. Vote, get involved. Don't sit on the sidelines. This is a battle for the direction of the right wing in Canada. And if you agree with me that you want to build the right wing that is inclusive, a right wing that fights for all Canadians, join my movement by going to fighterleaderwinner.ca. That's fighterleaderwinner.ca. You only have till June 3rd to sign up. Don't sit on the sidelines. Join me. Join me in building an inclusive conservative movement.
Thank you very much. And with that message, again, happy Mother's Day. And thank you very much for your time today on a Sunday morning. And really look forward to see you again, hopefully. And
thank you.
Wishing you a fantastic day and best of luck with the campaign.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.